this is Angela from Natural Living Alchemy. Welcome to my channel. In today's video, we are going to be reactivating a dehydrated sourdough starter, and this is one that I happened to just purchase off of Amazon. So my starter happens to be a San Francisco sourdough variety, and it is from the company Captain Sour Pants. I just liked the name, I thought it was funny, I thought I'd give it a try. But by the end of this video, you will know how to reactivate a dehydrated starter as well as maintain your starter. And then in a separate video in the future, I will be doing a couple different videos on different breads you can make with this, such as in sandwich bread and an inclusion loaf. So what is sourdough? It seems to be all over the place lately. Well, sourdough is just a type of bread that uses fermentation by naturally occurring yeast and bacteria to help raise the dough. What would be the difference between a San Francisco sourdough and just a traditional sourdough? There are just a couple little differences. So the main one, though, is the presence of just a little strain of beneficial lactic acid bacteria that gives the San Francisco sourdough its characteristic tangy flavor, and this is the Lactobacillus San Franciscus. Now, at one point, scientists believed that bacteria was only present in the San Francisco Bay Area, but we do know now that this bacteria is found in many places all over the world. Now, the other thing is San Francisco actually has its own what we would consider microclimate with cool temperatures and frequent fog. And those both would play a role in the microbial community in the sourdough starter. Now, the strain Lactobacillus San Franciscus is more tolerant to lower temperatures than other Lactobacillus strains, as well as the frequent fog may be a reason for the unique strains of wild yeast found in San Francisco sourdough. Before we get to reactivating this, I just want to go over a couple important things that you might want to know, especially if you've never made anything with sourdough before. So once we get to mixing this up, we are looking for our starter to be the consistency of a thick pancake batter. So just keep that one in mind. Now, after we complete step one, you're going to slowly mix the water in secondly and only add enough water to fully hydrate into a thick consistency. So you may not actually need the full amount of water listed in these steps. It can take 2 to 3 days before you start noticing any type of activity. So just make sure that you are following the reactivation instructions for at least 3 full days. Even if your starter is doubling in size, we just want to allow the starter to acclimate to your specific local environment. Now, what does that mean, acclimating to your environment? Well, let's say you were in San Francisco. Never been, a beautiful place I would certainly love to visit one day. Now, say you met somebody there, you have a baker friend, and they give you a little bit of sourdough starter so that you can take it home and make your own bread. But then you get home and you decide that you do want to make that bread, and you make a few batches, but then you notice that it's changed a little bit. Well, this happens because the local to you yeast and bacteria will actually start to take over in your starter. So what that means is you'll just notice, I live in Canada, very far from San Francisco, very, very different climate up here. So I may notice that when I first make this bread, after our starter's activated, it's going to taste a certain way, have a certain texture and all that. But then maybe a year down the road, I actually look back and notice, hey, that bread is completely different. Well, that's why. It's just because your local yeast and bacteria are just a little bit too different than the ones found in here when it first started, but that's okay. You are still going to have a beautiful sourdough starter, and you can make some wonderful loaves. Now, a couple other things to consider. It is definitely normal for a starter to rise after feeding and then slowly settle back down. Now, you may not notice when it's risen, but you will definitely notice on your jar, and I'm going to show you a way that you can keep track of this, okay? But I'll show you after we're done mixing it up. Now, timing. Timing is very important. You need to make sure that you can feed the starter at least within the first few days at its specific and recommended time. And this is because delaying the feeding, because maybe we get too busy, is actually going to hinder the reactivation process, and it may increase the chances of our sourdough starter failing. So just make sure that you have the time to dedicate to this reactivation period. But I promise, when it is reactivated, it is super simple to maintain. And a good ratio to follow to feed your sourdough starter when that time comes is a 1:1:1. So that is 1 part starter, 1 part flour to 1 part water. Let's talk about the equipment that you're going to need. So I did purchase most of this in a handy little kit I got off of Amazon. I will have a non-affiliate link in that description box below in case you want to pick one up. But you're just going to need a jar. And then you're going to need a lid. So we have a couple different options. So my set came with these 2 lids. It actually came with a double set of everything, but I currently have a different starter in my other jar. So lids. You don't necessarily want to use this metal one until after everything is activated and you're wanting to maintain it and store it in the fridge. Now, if all you had was this lid, just don't put it on all the way. That works too. Now, the set that I bought came with this little fabric one. Looks like a little hat. You could use this. You could use a coffee filter. You could use paper towel with like a rubber band around the top there. Whatever you want to do. You do want to be careful though that your jar is big enough so that when your starter raises, it's not going to end up in your fabric lid or in your paper towel or your coffee filter or anything like that, because it could get moldy. Okay, that was a mouthful. You're also going to need a thermometer. This one came in my set. And then so this little thing tells you when it is time, when you last fed your sourdough starter. So on the jar, last fed on, and then here it has the different days, and then just some different like 6 a.m., 12, and then 6 p.m. Okay, so then you would just line this up on what day it is, and then I like to just put this elastic at the top of where the sourdough starter is, because then you can monitor if it has raised and then lowered it all. Okay, so you're also going to need a spatula to stir everything. We're also going to need just some all-purpose flour and some lukewarm water. And I prefer to use bottled or filtered in this reactivation part, but that's completely up to you. You just want to make sure that your water is chlorine and fluoride free. So say you were just wanting to use tap water, you can definitely just fill a container up and leave the lid off for about 24 hours. And from my understanding, that's going to help get rid of the chlorine and the stuff that you just don't want in your water. So what we're going to do before we start mixing our starter up is you want to know how much your jar weighs. And the reason that you want to know this is once it gets time to start discarding some of this and adding more flour, it just really helps to know how much your jar actually weighs in the beginning, so you know exactly how much starter you have in here. So what we're going to do, we'll turn it on, make sure it's on grams, put the jar on. Perfect. So this is 456 grams. I write that right on the bottom, just with a Sharpie. So then what we're going to do in a clean jar or bowl, we're going to add our starter packet. Okay, so in one of these little bags, you're going to get all of your instructions and your wonderful dehydrated sourdough starter. So we're going to take our starter and put it into our jar. And then we're going to add 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour. And then we're going to put 2 tablespoons of our water in it. And then you're going to grab your spatula and we're just going to mix this thoroughly. Now, what I am going to do is I am going to just put a little bit more water in here because this is not any type of pancake batter consistency. So we're just going to add a little bit more water and then just mix it in. Perfect. So once everything is just nicely mixed up, now it is still a little bit thick, but I don't want to add too much more water in it. So this is okay. So everything is nicely, thoroughly mixed. I do like to try to make sure that I don't leave too much of the starter just kind of above because it'll start to get kind of gross on the inside of your bowl or your jar. So sometimes what I do like to do is just grab a little bit of paper towel and then just kind of wipe this stuff out. Perfect. Okay. So then what we're going to do is you want to cover it with your cloth lid or any type of breathable lid that you're going to be using. If you're not going to be using a cloth, you're just going to take your other lid and then just put it on so it's not on securely or tightly. Okay? And then we are going to put our little timer on here. So what are we at? We are at Wednesday at 9:30 a.m. We'll just put it there. As you can see, we don't have that much starter, so we'll just put this at the very bottom, line this up from where we fed it last. If you didn't have one of these, you could certainly just use a rubber band and a little piece of paper with the time on it if you aren't going to remember. But anyway, so we are now going to place this in a warm place. So that would be 70 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit, and we're going to leave it for 12 hours. Now, you have a couple different options depending on the temperature of your house because we are looking for something around 70 to 75. So what you could do is you could put it in your oven. Don't turn your oven on, but just turn on the light. And then that will bring the temperature up and it will have a nice and warm environment. Another thing that I like to do is it's my husband's lunch bag he got from work. I've stolen it and that's okay. So what I'll do is I'll take like a tea towel and then sometimes I will put this in the dryer. Maybe my house is a little bit too cold because, well, it's darn hot out. So trying to keep it comfortable, a little too cold for sourdough sometimes. So I will warm this up maybe 10 minutes in the dryer, put it in the bottom, and then put my jar inside. You could also put it on top of your refrigerator or anywhere high above. Heat rises and you can just find the way that it's going to work best for you so that your sourdough starter can be around that 70 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, I will check back with you in 12 hours and then I'm going to show you what our step 2 is. So it's been 12 hours and it is time for our first feeding. So one thing I did forget to mention is you do want to put on a thermometer on your jar just so that you know approximately what temperature it's at. Ours has been sitting at 78 degrees all day, which is perfect. So this is what we are looking like so far. So what we're going to do now is we are going to add 1/4 of a cup of all-purpose flour. And then you're going to need to put up to 1/4 of a cup of water in here. So what I'm going to do is just put a little bit in first and just get it to start mixing up, and then just see how much we're going to need. Because remember, we are looking for a thick pancake-like batter consistency. And then what I do like to do is just kind of tip it underneath and just see, there we go, if we can see if there's any flour. So this is all looking mixed together, so that's good. Okay, so now this is what we are looking like. As you can see, it does look like that thick pancake batter consistency. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to turn our little elastic here just to show what time our last feeding was. Put on our thermometer, put on our little hat, and then we are going to put this in a warm place and allow it to sit for another 12 hours before our next feeding. It's been 12 hours since our last feeding, and let's see what we've got now. So if you just can, where are you? There you are. So if you can just see, there's just some bubbles kind of starting to just form on the surface. There's, I don't know, about 3. So we are now going to do our next feeding. So we are going to be adding half a cup of flour, all purpose, and then up to half a cup of our spring water. So we're just going to give this a nice stir to mix everything up. Perfect, and then we're going to add in our flour. And that was half a cup, and then it's up to half a cup of water. So we'll just add a little bit to start. Now I was going to measure out exactly how much water I am using, because it does say to use up to the half a cup, but I do think that it's really going to matter what the humidity in your kitchen is as to how much water you're going to use. Just a little more, I think, will be our sweet spot. That's looking good. We're going to check the bottom. We can't see anything. Checking the bottom, we can see that all of the flour has been stirred in. So now what we're going to do, and then I'm just going to kind of clean off the sides, just because I don't really like when it looks like that. Okay, so now that we have it all mixed in with this feeding, we are just going to change our little elastic. And then I'm just going to, now that let's just move this out of the way here. I went and made a mess when I tipped it over. Okay, perfect. So we will just line that up there. We will throw on our thermometer again, put on her hat, and then now we are just going to leave it covered. The instructions do not specify it needs to be sitting in a warm place. So I'm probably just going to leave it right here on my counter, and I will see you in 24 hours when it is time to do our first discard and then feed her again. We are now on step 4 of rehydrating our San Francisco sourdough, and my goodness, look at our jar today. So what does this mean? This means, okay, we're gonna just take this out of there. So this means that our sourdough starter actually rose all the way up here, and then it did fall back down. And that's okay. It's not gonna stay up there all of the time, but that is really, really a good sign of something that we are looking for. So what today's steps are telling us to do is we need to discard quite a bit of this until we have half a cup left. And then we're just going to add the half a cup of flour and up to half a cup of our spring water. So what I did want to do is just, when we make sourdough, we're generally working in weights, not cups. So I am just going to weigh how much half a cup of the sourdough starter is, and then when you are doing this at home, you would just leave this amount in the jar, okay? So we're gonna start by giving it a nice stir. Oh my goodness, just look at that. Okay, so let's see here. So I have my little measuring cup set to half a cup. Okay, so my half a cup of starter is equaling 117 grams. So we are just going to move that over to the side, and I'm just going to move my scale because I don't need it anymore. And then we are just going to dump the rest of this out. Now I understand that it does seem somewhat wasteful, but we can't actually use this yet. So if we can't use it, there's really no point in keeping it around. Now, one other thing that I do want to mention, you want to be careful to, one, when you're dumping this out, you don't get it on the wall. This stuff is stronger than drywall plaster. I got some on the wall beside my garbage can, and well, it's kind of stuck there now. But the other thing is, look at how sticky that this starter is, okay? So it's super sticky. And when it dries very, very hard because it's just flour and water, right? So let's think about the plumbing in our houses. So I like to make sure that none of this actually ends up going down my drain. And when I wash my jars out, I actually have like a separate wash basin that I like to use. And then I dump the water outside because I am not willing to pay to get my pipes having to potentially be replaced because my sourdough starter has just clogged everything up. So just something to be cautious of when you're doing this at home. So I'm just gonna go clean kind of this gross stuff around the top, and I'll be right back. Okay. So this is about as clean as we need our jar to be. It's okay if there's still a little bit left in the bottom, but I'd mainly just like to make sure that there's nothing left of the starter around the top that's going to end up sticking to our cover. So what we're going to do next is put our half a cup of starter back in here. And then we are going to add our 1/2 cup of flour as per our instructions. And then we will add up to 1/2 cup of our water. Now we just leave her on the cupboard for another 24 hours. Now, full transparency, it was about 22 hours since our last feeding, but I have some stuff that I need to go and do shortly, and I thought if I did it after I got back, then it would just be too long and she would be too hungry. So if those 2 hours that I did it sooner hindered anything, you guys will be the second to know. So a couple other things. So 24 hours from now, you're going to come back and you're going to repeat this step. You're going to leave 1/2 cup of discard in the bottom of your jar, and then you're going to add 1/2 cup of all-purpose flour and up to 1/2 cup of water. And then just mix well and just cover. And keep repeating those steps every 24 hours for about 3 to 7 days, just until the starter is really, really, really bubbling and it's rising regularly to double its starting point, which is really important as to why we want to make sure that our elastic is just at the top of where our starter ends. So I will be back to show you in about 3 to 7 days once she's ready, once it looks like, and how you can test it to see if it is ready to be made into bread. Now, at this point, another thing that you might want to consider doing is naming your sourdough starter. I don't know, maybe it's my autism talking, and I just like to name most things. The sourdough starter is no exception. So I've been calling mine Sandy simply because it is a San Francisco sourdough starter. My other one that I have, her name's Rylene because she was started with rye flour. But anyway, yeah, naming your sourdough starter is just another part of what I just consider to be, it's just fun. So I will check back with you in 3 to 7 days to show you what she looks like. Let's talk about one of the signals that your sourdough starter is going to give you when it is ready to be tested. Now, apart from being all full of our bubbles here and having some active bubbles on the surface, there's actually something else that you would want to look at. So if you notice, the very top of our starter still looks a little bit domed. What that's telling us is our starter is still rising, it is still moving up. If the top starts to look like it's sinking down, maybe you even notice some lines on the side from where it rose, and then it's starting to go below that level, then it's already past its peak and it's already starting to fall. Now, what we are waiting for is for our surface to actually be more flat. Once it's flat and more evened out, that is a good time to do your float test because that might be your starter telling you that it is ready to go. But because we're still a little bit domed on the top of here, we are just going to leave it and just continue feeding it every 24 hours. Now, one other thing that I would like to mention, and I was hoping mine was going to do this, but it hasn't so far. So what happens if you come back to your sourdough and there's a liquid that's kind of sitting on the top? It could range from maybe it's on the clearer side all the way to maybe like a purplish kind of gray color. That is actually completely fine. That is a byproduct of this process, and that liquid is called hooch. Now, if you do come across it, you have two different options. You can either dump it out, or you can just stir it back in because it is completely harmless. It's just up to you, and it depends on what you are wanting to do. So I'm going to continue to watch my starter, Sandy, and I will show you what it looks like when we are ready to do the float test, because the float test is what is going to tell us if our sourdough starter is ready to be baked or not. We are now on day 6, and I want to give this a test and see if she is ready to go. So if we look on the top, it's no longer domed up as if it's still rising. It's not dipping as if it is ready to drop. It is more flat on the top. So what we're going to do is get a little glass of water, and you're just going to take a little bit of your starter and put it in the water. Perfect. So as you can see, we are floating on the top, and this means that our starter is ready to go, and it is ready to be made into your first loaf of bread. Now that we know how to activate our starter, let's talk about how we're going to maintain it, because with some proper maintenance, this starter can last you indefinitely. So the first suggestion I have is you want to keep a minimum of 50 grams of starter, just so that you can feed it before you want to bake, and make sure that you leave at least 50 grams of starter after you've baked, just so that you can keep using it. This means that you would discard your starter down to 50 grams. You would then add 50 grams of all-purpose flour and 50 grams of water until you have a thick pancake-like batter consistency. Let it sit covered in a warm place, and then once your starter starts to bubble and it's near peak, it is ready to be mixed into your dough as per your recipe. And then you definitely just want to make sure that you have that 50 grams of starter left for your next bake. So if you were planning on being a frequent baker, maybe once a day, maybe once every few days, you can just keep your starter on the counter and then just discard and feed it every 24 hours. If you're planning on baking a little bit more infrequently, you would want to keep it in the fridge, use your lid to secure it, and then you would just discard and then feed it before baking at least once a week. Now, I have seen a couple different influencers, and they have left their sourdough starter in the fridge for I think the one girl said 5 months, completely forgot about it, left in the back, and she was still able to use it. So if that's the case, you're just going to want to do the same process: 50 grams of starter, 50 water, 50 flour, just until it is good and active again, and then you can just definitely start to bake. Don't forget to hit the like button if you've liked this video, and share it with anyone else who you think might enjoy it. Consider subscribing to the channel so that we can spend more time together and that you don't miss future videos. But I just want to say thanks for stopping by today, and I'll see you next time.